was having a heck of a series, and they didn't have anybody really to deal with him, and he went small. Well, you're not going to be as good as Golden State is going small, because that's the way they played all year. But I thought that, I didn't understand why we wanted to grow a beard and all this stuff. This is during the early 70s, so you get all protested.
Good things happen if you're in the right place, and the only way you can get there is to get there before the other guy. And so, I have a story about Pete Maravich. I went to a basketball camp, the only one I ever went to when I was in college in Davidson and Lefty Driesell. Russell has an answer for everything. All right, it's just the way he is. He's a very thoughtful guy, and
How good was Dave Cowens? That question might seem simple, but the answer is anything but. You might have heard he was just an undersized center who benefited from playing for the Celtics. You might think he was a replacement who could never match Bill Russell's greatness. You might believe he was too small, too scrappy, and too limited to be truly special. But when the actual legends of basketball were asked about Dave Cowens, they told a completely different story. They revealed something that changed everything we thought we knew about this player. Quick thing, if you're enjoying this story about Cowens already, hit the hype feature and give this video some hype, because Dave Cowens deserves that kind of energy. The man literally played like his life depended on it every single night. Once you hear what the greatest players in NBA history said about him, you'll understand why this moment in the 70s mattered so much. The decade of the 1970s was unlike any other era in basketball. It was chaotic, it was physical, it was unpredictable. The old dynasties were crumbling, new teams were rising, the ABA was merging with the NBA. Everything felt turbulent and uncertain. It was a battle for the soul of the game. And right in the middle of all this chaos stood one player who refused to be ignored. One player who made everyone around him better. One player who defined an entire generation through sheer force of will and relentless energy. Let's start with number 5. The man who watched Cowens from the opposition's perspective. Jerry West, the logo himself, the star who dominated the West while the Celtics fell apart. Jerry West had a front row seat to what happened in Boston after 1969. He watched the Celtics collapse to 34 wins and miss the playoffs for the first time since 1950. Russell was gone. The dynasty was over. Boston looked finished. It looked like the Celtics were entering a dark age that might last forever. West himself was winning championships with the Lakers, but he watched Boston's decline with genuine interest because he understood the history and tradition. But then something extraordinary happened, and Jerry West noticed exactly who was responsible. West called Dave Cowens the engine behind the entire Celtics resurgence. Not just a piece of it, not just a helpful addition. The engine. That is the word he chose, and it was perfect. When you call someone the engine, you mean that without them, the whole machine stops working. You remove that part, and the car doesn't move at all, no matter how good the other pieces are. That is what West saw in Cowens. The numbers tell the story West was talking about. Before Cowens arrived in 1970, the Celtics won 34 games and sat at home during the playoffs. In 1971, his rookie year, they won 44 games. That is 10 more wins in a single year with one player added to the roster. The next year, 1972, 56 wins. Then came 1973, and the Celtics won 68 games, a franchise record that matched the greatest seasons of the Russell era. And in 1974, they won a championship. That is a 7-year transformation that Jerry West understood began with one man, Dave Cowens. West understood something that goes deeper than just winning games. He understood how basketball works at the highest level. He understood that one player can change everything about how a team operates. Cowens did not just add scoring or rebounding. He changed the entire identity of the Celtics. He made them faster. He made them more physical. He made them harder to score against. He made them a team to fear again. West also noted that Cowens was the most improved player on the Celtics. This observation is crucial because it shows something beyond just raw talent. It shows growth. It shows development. It shows a player who understood his role and worked to expand it. Cowens entered the league as a raw energy player, pure athleticism and will. But he developed a deadly left-handed jumper. He learned the high post. He learned how to run pick and rolls. He evolved. He transformed himself into a complete player while maintaining that relentless intensity that made him special. West respected that growth. because he understood the game's architecture and the work ethic required to improve. He understood that Cowens drove the team's transition offense. He powered the pressure defense. He created the identity that made them dangerous. Without Cowens, the Celtics were a nostalgic act, clinging to memories of Russell. With him, they were a dynasty reborn. West also appreciated that Cowens was criminally underrated. Everyone knew about the Lakers' dominance in the West. Everyone understood that Kareem was a statistical monster. But Cowens operated in the shadow of Boston's history. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't graceful like Kareem. He was a scrapper, a hustle player. Yet from across the country, Jerry West saw the truth. Cowens was the engine that powered everything. Now let's move to number 4, a man who faced Cowens head-to-head in the Eastern Conference Finals and came away with something between respect and amazement. Nate Thurman, known as Nate the Great, had been the premier defensive center of the 1960s. He battled Bill Russell. He battled Wilt Chamberlain. He battled all the giants of that era and held his own against every single one of them. He built a career on toughness and defensive excellence. He was a warrior on the court. But when Nate Thurman looked at Dave Cowens, he said something that stands out above every other opponent he faced in his entire career. Nate the Great called Cowens the toughest man he ever played against. Now, Thurman was careful to clarify what he meant because the distinction was important. He said, and I quote, "By toughness, I don't mean he is the best. I just mean he is the toughest." He is a new breed of center who has proven that 6'9" is big enough in a given situation. Thurman was making a crucial distinction between overall skill and pure fighting spirit. Kareem might have been more talented, Russell might have been more cerebral, but in terms of relentless, never backing down toughness, nobody fought harder than Cowens. Nobody refused to accept his limitations the way Cowens did. The 1976 Eastern Conference Finals gave Thurman the perfect laboratory to observe this phenomenon close-up. Cowens and his Celtics faced Thurman and his Cleveland Cavaliers. Thurman was in the twilight of his career, but he still had to deal with this energetic, frantic, seemingly inexhaustible player, night after night for an entire series. Thurman marveled at Cowens' rebounding ability. Remember, Cowens is 6'9", and he is playing against centers who tower over him by 4, 5, sometimes 6 inches. Yet in many series, Cowens averaged 16-plus rebounds. That is not a typo. That is not an exaggeration. A 6'9" center pulling down 16 rebounds per game against 7-footers. Against players who had gravitational advantages, height advantages, weight advantages. And Cowens was still getting his share of the rebounds and then some. Thurman said something that reveals exactly why this was possible. He stated, "I never faced a center who hustled the way he does." To Thurman, toughness was the ability to overcome physical disadvantages through pure work rate and refusal to quit. Cowens would box out bigger men with perfect leverage. He would dive on the floor for loose balls knowing he would hit the ground hard. He would initiate contact constantly, making every possession physical. He refused to accept that he was smaller. Instead, he attacked the disadvantage head-on, turning it into a strength through effort and intelligence. Thurman's observation about Cowens being a new breed is historically important and significant. The 1970s marked the transition from slow, post-up dominant centers to more mobile, energetic big men who could play multiple positions. Cowens was the prototype and the blueprint for the high-energy, switchable center that would become more common over time. Thurman saw in Cowens the evolution of an entire position and the future direction of basketball. This is what the future looked like. It was not about standing at the rim and dominating through size alone. It was about speed, quickness, movement, and relentless energy. Bill Russell had predicted this shift with his talk of speed and heart years before, and now Thurman was witnessing it in real time with Cowens on the court. Moving to number 3, we encounter a player who rarely gave praise to anyone, a player whose records and skills were so dominant that he saw most of his rivals as inferior to him in fundamental ways. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the all-time scoring leader, the man with the unstoppable skyhook, the walking encyclopedia of basketball perfection and technical skill. Kareem and Cowens were opposites in almost every way imaginable. Kareem was calm and composed, technically flawless, powerful through skill and grace and perfected mechanics. Cowens was chaotic and frantic, messy and disorganized looking, emotional and powerful through sheer force of will and refusal to be beaten. Yet Kareem said something remarkable about Cowens that surprised people. He called him one of the greatest competitors who ever played basketball. He said Cowens always gave 100% effort on every single possession. Now, this is significant because Kareem rarely offered praise to his rivals. Kareem looked at many of the centers of his era as lumbering brutes who could not match his skill or intelligence. But Cowens posed a different kind of problem entirely. Cowens posed a cerebral and physical puzzle that Kareem had to respect. Cowens was smart, athletic, and impossibly relentless. He could not be beaten by skill alone because he simply refused to accept defeat. The 1973 season brought their rivalry to a head in dramatic fashion. Statistically, the numbers favored Kareem by a wide margin on paper. Kareem averaged 30.2 points per game, 16.1 rebounds, and 5 assists. Cowens averaged 20.5 points per game, 16.2 rebounds, and 4.1 assists. Kareem was the superior scorer by far, dominating opponents with his unstoppable skyhook. Kareem was the more accomplished rebounder. Kareem was more versatile offensively and could create his own shot anytime he wanted. By the numbers, Kareem should have won the MVP award. It was not even a close call statistically, but Cowens won it in a landslide. 67 first-place votes to 33. This was not a controversial decision among voters. This was a statement about what matters in basketball beyond individual statistics and scoring prowess. Why did this happen when the stats clearly favored Kareem? Because of what Kareem himself identified as the competitor factor that mattered most. Cowens led the Celtics to a 68-14 record, the best in the entire league by a significant margin that nobody could dispute. The voters and his peers who understood the game valued the engine quality of Cowens. He impacted the game's tempo in a way Kareem, who played a more methodical half-court game, did not and could not. Cowens raised the pace. He created chaos. He made everything faster and harder and more difficult for the opposition. He made opponents uncomfortable with his relentless pressure and physical intensity. The head-to-head proof came on February 10th, 1974. Both centers played 48 minutes, an entire game with no rest. Cowens scored 20 points and grabbed 20 rebounds with 2 assists. Kareem scored 28 points and grabbed 21 rebounds and added 7 blocks and 4 assists. Kareem won the statistical battle. The Bucks won the game 95-86. But here's what matters. Cowens grabbed 20 rebounds against a 7'2" giant. He refused to yield. He refused to accept that he was outmatched. Kareem noted that he did not remember ever playing against Cowens and seeing him do anything less than his best. This consistency of effort, this refusal to take a playoff, this is what defined Cowens in Kareem's eyes. Kareem also understood something about Cowens that speaks to why those legends respected him so deeply. Cowens maintained 100% effort for the full duration of every game. Whether playing 30 minutes in a blowout or 48 minutes in a championship duel, the intensity remained constant. That is what Kareem meant when he called him one of the greatest competitors. It was not about stats. It was about refusal. Refusal to be beaten. Refusal to give less than everything. Now we arrive at number 2, the partner in the trenches, the teammate who saw Cowens night after night in games under intense circumstances. John Havlichek, known as Hondo, was himself legendary for his indefatigability and relentless work ethic. Havlichek was a marathon runner in a basketball uniform. He played forever, he played hard, he played smart, he played hurt. He epitomized the Celtics' culture of sacrifice and commitment. And when Havlicek looked at Dave Cowens, his teammate and partner, he said something that stopped everyone in their tracks. Havlicek said that Cowens kills himself to win. This phrase was not hyperbole. It was a literal observation of Cowens' physiological state during games. Cowens played with a reckless disregard for his own body. He dove for loose balls without thinking about landing or injury. He took charges against heavyweights who outweighed him by 50 pounds. He sprinted until he was near collapse. He played as if the outcome of the game determined his survival. Havlicek, who was himself famously tireless and relentless, was amazed by Cowens' exertion level and commitment to the game. For Havlicek to marvel at another player's effort and sacrifice speaks volumes about Cowens' dedication. These two formed a dynamic that was described as identical in intensity. They matched each other effort for effort. They were a dual engine core that compensated for the Celtics' lack of a traditional dominant big man in the Russell mold. Havlicek provided the calm, clutch scoring, and veteran leadership. Cowens provided the chaotic energy that disrupted opponents and created chaos and opportunity. Cowens himself articulated the philosophy he shared with Havlicek. Cowens said, "How can I say I am tired? I cannot be tired when everyone else on the team is hustling. I am just doing my job. This simple statement mirrors Havlichek's work ethic perfectly. It is not about claiming exhaustion or making excuses. It is not about protecting your body for next season. It is about seeing your teammates give everything they have and matching that commitment completely. This mutual accountability was the powerful engine of the 1974 and 1976 championship seasons. These two men held each other to an impossible standard every single night. They expected the other to give everything, and they delivered on that expectation without exception. Their partnership was built on shared sacrifice and shared commitment. Havlicek eventually said something that proved how much he valued Cowens' contribution to the Celtics' legacy. He stated, "No one ever did more for the Celtics than Dave Cowens." This is a massive and significant admission from a man who played alongside Bill Russell for years. Think about that statement for a moment. Havlicek played with the greatest defender in basketball history. He won multiple championships with Russell. He witnessed Russell at his absolute peak. He understood what Russell meant to the Celtics dynasty. Yet he was saying that Cowens did more for the Celtics than Russell did. That is incredible and meaningful praise. The 1974 finals validated this claim and proved their partnership worked perfectly. The Celtics faced the Milwaukee Bucks in a 7-game series. Game 7 was played in Milwaukee, where the Bucks had the home crowd advantage. The Celtics were facing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at his absolute prime, playing in his arena. Cowens, surrendering 5 inches in height, played 47 grueling minutes in that decisive game. He scored 28 points and grabbed 14 rebounds while defending Kareem and diving for loose balls. He did not stop Kareem. Kareem was brilliant, but Cowens outran him. He forced Kareem to defend the perimeter. He beat him down the floor in transition. He exhausted him through sheer effort and relentless movement. Havlicek was named Finals MVP, but he understood the truth. Cowens was the reason they survived. The killing himself aspect was tactical. Cowens exhausted himself to ensure Kareem was exhausted too. When both players are tired, the one with more will wins. That was Cowens. The 1976 finals against the Phoenix Suns produced an even more dramatic and intense example of this philosophy. Game 5 went into triple overtime, a rare occurrence in championship basketball. It is often called the greatest game ever played because of the level of intensity and competition. Cowens played 48 plus exhausting minutes in that brutal thriller. He and Havlicek simply outlasted the Suns through superior conditioning and will. They would not quit. They would not break under pressure. They played until the other team could no longer match their will and intensity. The kills himself style had a cost, though. Cowens' prime was relatively short. By 1979, after less than a decade in the league, Cowens was essentially done as a superstar force. His body had been broken down by years of collision and relentless intensity. Havlicek's retirement in 1978 marked the end of this partnership. It was the end of an era. Cowens gave a farewell to Havlicek that highlighted their bond. He said, "Players might come and go, but there have not been and will not be many like this man." That is how deeply Cowens respected his partner. That is how much Havlicek meant to him. They had been through wars together. Finally, we arrive at number 1, the man who created the entire context for understanding Dave Cowens. Bill Russell, the greatest defender in NBA history, the patriarch of the dynasty. To understand why Russell's endorsement of Cowens mattered, you need to understand what Russell represented and what his retirement meant. In 1969, the Boston Celtics defeated the Los Angeles Lakers in the finals. Bill Russell was the player-coach of that team. After that championship, Russell retired. He took with him the most dominant defensive infrastructure in the history of basketball. Russell was not just a great player. Russell was a system. Russell was a philosophy. Russell was the Celtics. What happened next was shocking to everyone. The Celtics, an organization that had operated as a mechanism of inevitable victory for over a decade, suddenly found itself mortal. The 1969-70 season was a stark awakening. The team plummeted to a 34-48 record. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 1950. The defensive anchor was gone. The Celtics' mystique appeared to be retiring along with number 6. Boston looked finished. Into this void stepped skepticism. When the Celtics drafted Dave Cowens with the 4th overall pick in 1970, the reaction was confusion and doubt. Cowens was 6'9" in an era dominated by giants. The league in 1970 was entrenched in the era of the giant. Lou Alcindor, soon to be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, stood 7'2". Wilt Chamberlain was 7'1". These were the men who dominated the game. The conventional wisdom said that a championship defense required a stationary, rim-protecting giant who could stand at the basket and say no to everyone. Critics questioned how a player who stood eye to level with power forwards could possibly anchor a defense against the giants of the Western Conference. How could he rebound against these towers? How could he take up space in the paint? How could 6'9" be enough? The skepticism seemed reasonable and logical based on what basketball looked like at that time. This skepticism is crucial context, because Russell's response changed everything. Russell did not dismiss the critics. He did not pretend size did not matter. Instead, he identified something unique in Cowens. Russell said that he wanted Cowens for the Celtics because Cowens had speed and heart. Speed and heart. Two simple words that reframed an entire position. Russell, whose genius lay in intellect, timing, and psychological warfare, recognized that he could not be replaced by a poor imitation of himself. The Celtics could not find another 6'10" genius with a 7'4" wingspan. That player did not exist. Therefore, the replacement had to operate on an entirely different axis. Russell identified that Cowens' specific attributes would allow Boston to invert the standard defensive paradigm. Instead of funneling players to a rim protector, the Celtics would use Cowens to press, trap, and deny the ball before it even reached the post. This was revolutionary thinking. This was reimagining what defense could look like. Russell understood that if you could pressure the ball in the front court, you could prevent traditional post-up plays from even starting. If you could deny entry passes, you made the opposing center's size irrelevant. Russell's observation of speed was validated by Cowens' deployment. Unlike Russell, who protected the paint from the inside out, Cowens protected it from the outside in. He could come outside and shoot. This offensive spacing opened the lane for teammates, but it was his defensive speed that Russell admired. Cowens would switch onto guards, something that was a heresy in 1970. He would blitz pick and rolls. He turned a size disadvantage into a tactical advantage. The statistical comparison between Russell and rookie Cowens tells the story. Russell in 1968-69 played 42.7 minutes per game and grabbed 19.3 rebounds. Cowens in 1970-71 played 38 minutes per game and grabbed 15 rebounds. Cowens immediately assumed a Russell-like workload. While his rebounding was less than Russell, 15 rebounds per game for a rookie 6'9" center validated the heart metric. Cowens also averaged 17 points per game, providing the offensive speed and scoring punch that Russell, who averaged just 9.9 points, lacked. Cowens' aggression led to high foul trouble, averaging 4.3 fouls per game, but this was a side effect of his heart. He was willing to take risks that others would not. Russell understood something critical about the Celtics culture. The organization required a specific temperament. Russell had been a player coach, and he knew what that locker room needed. The blue-collar, lunch bucket mentality was the cultural bridge between the Russell and Cowens eras. By publicly endorsing Cowens, Russell effectively immunized the young center against the inevitable comparisons. He reframed the conversation from Cowens is too small to be Russell to Cowens has the speed and heart Russell values. This psychological air cover allowed Cowens to flourish. And flourish he did. The Celtics went from 34 wins to 44 to 56 to 68. In 1973, they won 68 games, a franchise record that matched the very best of the Russell era. Russell's endorsement was not just about basketball mechanics. It was a passing of the torch. It was Russell saying to the entire NBA, this man is legitimate. This man is the heir. This man will carry forward the Celtics tradition. Trust him. The beauty of having all 5 NBA legends praising Cowens is that together they paint a complete and comprehensive picture of his value and impact. Jerry West saw the big picture and the resurgence and the engine that powered everything. Nate Thurman saw the toughness and refusal to accept physical limitations. Kareem saw the competitor who would not surrender despite lacking physical tools. John Havlichek saw the martyr who killed himself every night for the team. And Bill Russell saw the heir with speed and heart to continue the legacy. Each legend used different words and different metaphors, but they were all describing the same fundamental truth about Dave Cowens. Dave Cowens was special and unique because he refused to accept his limitations and his disadvantages. He was smaller than his peers, so he compensated by being faster and more agile. He was undersized, so he was more intense and more relentless. He lacked the natural physical gifts of the giants around him, so he relied on speed and heart and willpower. The very things that critics said would hold him back and limit him became the exact things that made him legendary. The proof came in the moments that mattered most, and in the biggest games when everything was on the line and the stakes were highest. In 1974, in Game 7 of the Finals against Milwaukee, Cowens played 47 grueling minutes and scored 28 points against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in a decisive championship-clinching game. In 1976, in the greatest game ever played against Phoenix, Cowens went 48 minutes in a brutal triple overtime battle and simply refused to break or surrender. These were not statistical anomalies or lucky performances. These were moments where a player reached deep into his very being and found something beyond normal human effort and physical capacity. The intensity factor that all five legends emphasized and repeatedly mentioned, whether they called it speed and heart, or kills himself, or greatest competitor, or toughest man, or engine, reveals exactly why Cowens mattered so much to basketball history. Instances of his hyper-efficiency show the density and concentration of his play. On November 22, 1972, in just 37 minutes, Cowens scored 33 points, grabbed 18 rebounds, and had 7 assists. On December 1st, 1973, in 46 minutes, he scored 26 points, grabbed 22 rebounds, and had 7 assists. On March 5th, 1978, in just 32 minutes, he recorded 14 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. These were not lucky nights or random outcomes. These were expressions of a player operating at maximum intensity and velocity. Cowens played at such a high tempo and with such relentless effort that his 30 to 35 minutes were often more impactful than another center's 45 minutes. He emptied the tank every night. He brought everything he had. The cost of this relentless intensity was eventually paid by Cowens himself. By 1979, after less than a decade in the professional league, Cowens was essentially done as a superstar force and elite player. The engine that West described had redlined for far too long. His body had broken down from years of collision and relentless speed and abuse. The intensity that both Thurman and Kareem had feared and respected, the intensity that had produced multiple championships and transformed the Celtics, eventually consumed the player himself. Havlichek's prophecy and observation that he was killing himself to win proved tragically and prophetically accurate. Yet that brevity and shortened career does not diminish what Cowens accomplished in his window. If anything, it makes the legend more powerful and more meaningful. He burned bright and fast like a meteor. He gave everything he had without reservation. He left nothing on the floor. He left no energy in reserve. And for a distinct window in the 1970s, he was, according to the gods of the game themselves, the hardest working and most committed player to ever wear a basketball uniform. His commitment to excellence transcended statistics and accolades. Dave Cowens was the heir to Russell because he understood that true greatness and excellence required complete sacrifice and total commitment. He was the martyr to Havlichek because he knew that winning championships demanded full physical and mental commitment and complete willingness to give everything. He was the rival to Kareem because he refused to accept that natural talent alone was enough to win championships. He was the warrior to Thurman because he proved that relentless hustle and determination could overcome natural height disadvantages. He was the engine to West because he powered everything around him and made the entire system function through his energy and drive. The question at the beginning was simple but profound. How good was Dave Cowens? The answer, according to 5 NBA legends who played against him and knew him and understood the game at its highest level, is that he was better than people remembered, better than the statistics suggested, better than the popular narratives allowed, better than casual fans realized, better than historians had documented. He was a player who transformed an entire position through speed and heart. He was a player who refused to accept the limits others placed on him because of his height and physical disadvantages. He was a player who burned himself out completely in service of his team and his game and his teammates. Which legend's quote hit you the hardest? Was it Russell's vision of speed and heart that created a new way to defend? Was it Havlichek's description of killing himself through effort? Was it Kareem's respect for the greatest competitor he ever faced? Was it Thurman's acknowledgement of the new breed? Or was it West's declaration that Cowens was the engine that powered everything? Let me know in the comments which one resonated with you the most. And if you think Cowens is the most underrated big man ever in basketball history, hit that like button and let it be known. Subscribe for more deep dives into basketball history and the legends who played it. Thanks for watching.